So welcome to PartnerUp, the Partnerships Podcast. All right, we're live.
I'm excited to jump in. Get to work.
The thing that matters in a partnership is the trust and sacrifice.
Proposing, building software that works for you.
We're live with Braydan Young with a title unlike any other title we've had on the show before. So Braydan, welcome to PartnerUp.
Good to be here. Thanks, Jared. Thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we were just in the middle of an argument about private equity because Medallia just got acquired by Thoma Bravo for $6.4 billion. I believe was the number. Might be off by 100 million or so. And it looks, I mean, they've made some giant acquisitions in the past. I was looking, they made that cybersecurity acquisition for, I think, 12 billion, but this still seems crazy right now. And then I made this claim, Justin, you said, really? Which was that I believe that most private equity acquisitions, there's a big ecosystem hole to fill. Otherwise, why sell, right? Like, why go into private equity? Typically, it's to bring new management chops and to up-level unit economics to make the business more attractive to public markets or a buyer. Like, there is some reason why private equity sees upside in that business that public markets or another public company don't. I feel like a lot of those times there's a ecosystem isn't a core competitive advantage. Justin, what's your take on our friends over at Medallia? Obviously, congrats to them. A $6.4 billion valuation is nothing to shake a stick at, but in comparison of like outcomes, you know, I think ecosystem might have something to do with whether or not you might get acquired by private equity.
It could be. I don't know. I just wanted to poke the bear. Like, I didn't have an example of like, oh, this company, you know, as an example. I was just kind of like, that's a blanket statement. Let's push back on that.
I said maybe. I have a feeling.
I think that usually private equity, what gives you like a 2-year clock. It's like, all right, so now we have these guys, we got to refocus values and goals and management, and then usually spin them out in 2 years, right? Which is basically the time frame. So maybe it just hasn't worked yet to have one of those.
Maybe. I feel like we need to get some people at Thoma Bravo and Vista and all those people, you know, thinking this way about, you know, partner ecosystems, because if that's something you can, that's something you can start to really build on and make a competitive advantage. I mean, if you're HubSpot, if you're Marketo, if you're Salesforce, Adobe, Oracle, anyone in the enterprise, or even the Googles or the Microsofts, I mean, you can look at the multiple on revenue, or you can look at the ecosystem and the community of trust that's already established and then bring that into your wheelhouse. I mean, that seems like the multiple, you can't value it, which is nice, right? Like, look at all the startups that, you know, pre-revenue that, you know, Clubhouse, right? You just threw couple billion dollars for community on top of it, right? Like, you can get
6 months in. Right.
You can get a lot of multiples on this, you know, community, you know, ecosystem growth. So it seems like that might be, you know, just saying, private equity firms out there establishing some expertise and practice development around ecosystem. And you might end up installing, this is going to be my segue, your very first chief partnerships officer inside of these companies. And
What a segue.
Yeah, what a segue there. Nicely done.
I feel like that's what Thoma Bravo and Vista and all these people should do. They should bring in a chief ecosystem officer, chief partnerships officer. And we have our very first chief partnerships officer on the podcast, Mr. Braydan Young. So Braydan, I'm going to start with the question, which is a very simple one, which will probably take the entirety of this conversation, is why, as a co-founder of Sendoso, did you change your title to Chief Partnerships Officer?
So the biggest thing for us is, like, when we began, I started on the sales side. So it was like, hey, how can we get as many deals into Sendoso as possible? And when we started doing that, it was just straight, you know, forward selling from an SDR to me to help close it. And then from there, when I jumped over to the partnership team, a lot of what happens in partnerships is you're training the sales team so often on how to navigate a partner into a deal. You're like, hey, like, I just want to close the deal. I don't want to involve a partner. Like, that's too much. Like, just let me close it, and then I'll maybe introduce the partner, and then maybe I'll be like, hey, like, this is something I just closed. Let me make an intro for you. So we started to train the AEs a lot internally here, is like how to do joint selling, how to sell to the channel, how to have conversations about a partner when you're actually in the sales cycle. And as we started going through that, we started to bring on more and more partners, and our ecosystem got really big really fast. It was like we had agencies, we had integrations, we had professional services, we had all these different components. And the big thing was I had a seat at the table because I was one of the co-founders, and I was like, listen, we need to spend way more time on partnerships, building integrations, training not just the sales folks, but also the CX people on when to bring a partner in, because like we can make them successful as well. So like this is the kind of stuff that I started pushing. And then like, let's change my title to actually being chief CPO, chief partnership officer, one of the CPOs, because what do you got? Chief product officer, chief people officer. So let's throw another one in there. And so change it to that. And like the goal was like, I'll run the whole ecosystem from each one of those pillars: agencies, integrations, and kind of pro services. And so that's where we are now. It's been good. It's really elevated the conversation up to like, hey, like now when we go and talk to the board, we're not just talking about here's we ended up with the sales number. It's here's the sales number. Also here's the partnership number. How many deals are brought to us by our partners? How many of these we close together? How many of these are like actually from partners? Like all those numbers are really important to look at from an executive level, so you actually know how strong your ecosystem is. Because if it's not, you're going to hit a certain level and then you're going to kind of cap out from there. You're not going to keep going to that next level, because if you look at any of the big guys that are out there, they have very strong channels. So if you do not, you run to a tough spot. So that kind of answers your question. I would say the biggest thing was like we knew the partnerships, this world has to be bigger, and I had a seat at the table and knew that partnerships and this entire network needs to be stronger, and can push that from my seat, which is kind of why I changed my title to CPO. And I hope it's a fad. I hope people start changing their title as well to this role. I started... Quick segue. I started with chief alliance officer. Didn't work. Alliances, it's an old school term, so always go with partnership officer instead. Yeah.
So I'd imagine selling to the board, obviously it sounded like, source deals from partners or co-work deals from partners are big. How else are you measuring and explaining, to the board, this is what we've done in ecosystem, this is how we've built it, this is how it's impacting the business?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that's one of the big things where the space that we're in is we're seeing a lot of new softwares being developed to help do this. I mean, like, I think Partner.com, I think Crossbeam was one of the first ones there. I think that there's tools that you can use to track it, and there's really new ones coming out, which is amazing. But what we look at from like a board level is every deal that we closed, we'll see like out of those deals, which ones were sourced or which ones was a partner influence involved. And like, did that make the deal become bigger? Or did that make the deal close faster? So we spent a lot of time on those metrics: the speed to close, size of the deal, and then source are the typical ones that we look at when we're talking and looking at like Salesforce metrics. Like those are usually the three things that we'll look at. And then from there, our new metric that we just look at is like how many deals are basically influenced by partners. That's the one thing we look at.
What about the other side of the aisle? So SaaS is a game of lifetime value. How are you thinking about aggregating, board level insights for impact on customer health, retention, et cetera?
In terms of like, let's say customers are with us for a while, how do we continue to increase that value for them?
Right. So let's say, what you just presented to me, I think is a, like a bookings kind of, report of, hey, here's our quarterly performance, right? So here's the revenue that we brought in, the partner impact across sourced, influence, deal size, win rate, and probably time to close. So sales velocity. But then there's this other side. So for example, let's say, what's your most important integration today?
Salesforce for us.
Salesforce, right. So for example, I'm assuming there is a probably very substantial difference between a customer that has the Salesforce integration active and is using versus an organization that, A, maybe not be on Salesforce, or but B, probably more importantly, is not using but has, right? Are you yet aggregating that kind of retention and like usage and adoption metrics for the impact on your install base?
Yeah. So what we look at is sends, for example. So if you're sending something, whether that's a digital e-gift or a direct mail send or cupcakes, like we would call it a send. So on our world, we have like a running dashboard as to that send that took place. What was the start of the send? Like, was it sent through an integration? Like, was there a trigger in Salesforce at the send, or did someone go directly to sendoso.com, log in, and send it that way? And so we have a metric that we keep where we want a certain percentage of those sends, more than half, to take place in an integration, because we know if it's an integration, it's typically in the install base there, and someone's kind of fitting it into their workflow. So if someone's sending from Outreach or SalesLoft or HubSpot, like typically they're going to have a higher NPS score. Typically they're going to stick with us for a longer period of time because we're living in their kind of day-to-day operation, which was our thesis at the beginning of starting Sendoso, was we want to fit into where you are all day long, not have to go and log into an application. We just want to live there. And so that's when we look at a ton. We also look in terms of, like, if you're using the system, like integrations that we know you have that you might not have it installed yet. And that would be like a CX goal. So like, hey, CSM, you're talking to ABC customer. That's great. We know they're using Salesforce, but they don't have it hooked up. So that's typically something that we will comp them on, as well as to have as many integrations installed as possible and to have those actually being used as a metric we look at from a CX standpoint.
I think those are the things that, I think a couple episodes ago, by the time this one airs, we had Jay McBain on, who is the kind of channel chief at Forrester. So if you're not following Jay and you haven't listened to that episode, go back and check it out because it's incredible. And he talks about this different kind of time that we find ourselves in, where the role that you just described, that CSM, and being consultative in that process of, bringing in Zendesk, for example. Right. So like maybe it's a support use case and you want to wow your customers with some sort of gifts because they had a, poor experience. There was a bug, there was an outage, and your ability to like work and partner with Zendesk, that's going to determine whether or not, your end customer is actually utilizing the tool inside of, like, let's say a Zendesk. I just threw Zendesk out there because I feel like Salesforce is so ubiquitous and like easy. I'm assuming you probably also integrate with something like a Zendesk, Braydan?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
So like, I think Zendesk is a good one. I think that I think you could even throw HubSpot in there as one that maybe is not used as often, but is a really important integration for us. I think you make a good point though, because the CSM is one of those roles where they're really customer facing. And if we're talking about retention and keeping customers, not just like top of funnel where we spend a lot of time, but we spend time on retention as well, is a CX person has to know exactly what every single one of our integrations do, almost to a T, where it's like, hey, you're not using this. This is something you could use. And like, it's a lot of education to kind of throw into someone's head. Like when you're in sales, for example, you can talk about, hey, here's what Salesforce does, what Outreach does. Isn't that great? Like, yeah, hey, like you should buy it. But then it goes to the CX team and the sales and the solutions architects to actually set things up. And like, that's almost a tougher gig sometimes to basically make sure like, hey, here's how you're going to use these things. And then we're pushing on our end to make sure they're educated and enabled on how they actually work, because the more they know about it, the more successful the customer is going to be.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of the question that I was getting to is, who has trust with that Zendesk, account manager that might control a big account? It's a joint customer of yours. Is that account manager? Let's take this profile, AM at Zendesk, that's responsible for a, corporate to enterprise account. Good logo. Are they the ones that are going to be in the weeds with, your frontline, support users of Sendoso? No, they're probably not going to be in there. There's probably help docs and maybe a CSM. But they might have mind share with like that director of support or director of customer success or that VP of customer success. And that is what is required of that change management to get that person to change their workflow, right, in that support process. Because I'm assuming like the organizations that are probably wildly successful with Sendoso, they probably have some milestones or key moments where kind of like strategic gifting is more important than just random, right? Like they just throw random gifts out at people. Like if there's a bad experience or if they reach a certain milestone or like, something inside of the product, like there is a reason for receiving something from you. And then who? That probably needs to be built into some sort of system to surface, like Salesforce or Zendesk or HubSpot or some system. And who is going to convince the customer of that if your CSM can't get them to connect the integration? and can't train the team. It's your partner, right? Like that seems critical to you having an outsized competitive advantage to your competitors. If you're the one that can convince Zendesk, HubSpot, Salesforce to have conversations directly with the customer, hey, here's why you should be using this, versus let's say a competitor. I mean, who's going to win out in that situation? I would assume the one where the partner's making the recommendation.
Absolutely. And like I think like that's a really important part when it comes to like, because like that partner, like let's take the account in this, like I don't know, ABC enterprise client who Zendesk and us both are supporting. When they go and they talk to their outreach rep or their sales ops rep, it's typically the same person, right, who's involved in like that process. And they're like, hey, the cadence you wrote here, one of your steps should be to send a physical gift, because like that's
Right.
actually really that's going to increase everything. It's like you should talk to Sendoso and make that happen. It's like, oh yeah, shit, I do need to make that happen. And so like all of that kind of like circle of around like, hey, this is the best practice of how to do something is why we do so many joint webinars with those guys, because it helps kind of show like, hey, this is what to send, when to send, why you send it. Because like the whole thing about gifting and like using the power of gifting is like, one's reciprocity. Hey, I sent you something. You feel guilty. You want to get back to me. The other one is like, if I send something to you at the right time, I built a relationship, and myself, I'm in your head somewhere as someone who, Brayden's a nice guy. Like last time I talked to him, like he sent me a coffee before or sent me a hat after I talked to him, whatever have you. Like that's so important to have all those systems kind of working in tandem. And if they do, our most successful clients are the ones that they have triggers set up and they have actual menus of when people can just send out at will after they get off phone calls, etc. Usually.
Interesting. So once you start to get kind of hit your critical mass of partners, like what's key to making their value prop sticky in the mind of your team, like your CSMs in their customer conversation? How do you go about enabling them and getting them to understand, this is the point where I should think about a partner conversation or a partner recommendation and this specific type of partner?
Yeah, that has been probably our hardest thing to figure out, because we have like, if you I think like, let's take two sides. So if you first start with agencies, there are a shit ton of agencies, and like they all do different things, and like and we partner with a lot of them, and a lot of them are absolutely amazing. But I can't require my CSM to know if someone's asking about, hey, like I'm really struggling with writing a sequence. I'm like, oh, we have an agency, that's what they focus on. Like you should introduce and talk to these guys. So I can't rely on them for that. And like, even though I've built these massive menus and like things you can go in and read about all these different agencies, like it just doesn't work. Yeah. So we've done two things. One, we do like constant enablement to like, hey, like we bring like a partner onto an all hands, or even talk to the company. Like, here's what I do. Isn't it great? And like, we hope like that'll start to like get in people's minds, or like this is what this agency does. And whenever we see that on the agency side, we see a spike in referrals, which is awesome, which is exactly what we want. And then it kind of falls off again. So like we're hoping to kind of get that ingrained there. The next thing is we use Gong to a T, where we can actually catch things in Gong on phone calls, or if someone mentions a question that we know is an actual trigger for us, like we have someone who does that, we will email the CSM, be like, hey, like listen to your call, or I had a trigger in the call take place. Here's something that you could say next time around, or here's someone you can introduce who does that thing that they were asking about. So that's on the agency side. I want
to pause you there really quick, because that is something that we do. Like we have filters in Gong and tags. I'm curious. Let's go pull back one layer there. I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of those Gong tips and tricks for BD people, where you might have some tags or filters set up to where you can on a weekly basis drive more engagement from what's happening in the field. So is this as simple as like you have your partners set up as tags or filters in Gong? Like pull back the layer one time for us.
Yeah. So like all partners are tags for sure. Because if someone's like, hey, like I heard about you from RevShop, we're like, well, that should have been that's ours. And so like there's like we got to tag that. So there's those. There's also we tag phrases.
Quick question. Is that just like an ops thing that happens, like once a week, once a month or something? Or do you just go in and do it?
Yeah, we do it once a week. And like we go, so like this is actually something we've gone back and forth on. We've tried it both ways. Right now we're on the extreme where we'll mark it as like a partner influence lead right away. And at the end of the month, we'll go and we'll uncheck anything that like maybe the partner wasn't involved. But like typically like we sway towards the model of like, hey, partners were involved here. Like let's tell partners like the partner that we think brought these guys in about this deal. So like we tend to be very liberal on like PILs. like at the end of the day. And like we've done it the other way too, where we've gone the other side, and it wasn't as good because it's a good excuse to talk to a partner like, hey, like ABC company was asking about you, or like they use you, and so it's a good thing that we give our PAMs to talk about to our partners. So we mark those. We also mark if someone's like, hey, like simple phrases like I heard about you or I'm trying to do. So we have tags like that as well in Gong that will go in and listen to like those snippets of a conversation. It's a pretty big time investment for our partner managers. So like figure like an hour a day you might spend in Gong, like clicking around, like seeing like what's happening across the board for conversations. Is it scalable? No, probably not. I mean, like
Screw
maybe
that.
It's one of those things.
Screw that. I love it. Like that's like a tactical takeaway. I mean, let's be honest. In terms of channel account managers, partner account managers, the day in the life, where do you spend your time? I feel like an hour a day spent in the field, like what's happening in the field and then connecting the dots with partners. I think that's fantastic. And I bet most partner managers aren't doing that. So I think that's a great takeaway. Like do things that don't scale was like a Drift, moniker at the beginning. Shout out to Dave Gerhardt and David Cancel. I love that because you're going to see results that you couldn't get from systems operations, at least not for a while.
There is an education piece there. So like if you start calling AEs on that, you're like, hey, like these guys like this, they said on your phone call that like outreach brought them in. Why didn't you tell me this was happening? Or like, why didn't you tag this in Salesforce? Like, hey, this was a PIL by outreach. Then like it took us a while to get to the point as to why we cared so much. So we did had to bring data back to the AEs and be like, hey, the reason we care is because if we involve them in helping close your deal, the deal is going to be 30% bigger. So like, and it's going to close faster. And so we did have a pushback from the AEs at first being like, hey, partnership team, like you're just trying to get over my deals. No. So like there was a model of that where we did have some time on like, hey, this is why this is important. Can you begin to start to mark these things? So the hope is you get to a point where they just do it naturally on their own. But just know like that pushback did happen early on. We started doing the Gong stuff.
And I do it personally. So it's part of my daily flow to go in and check for my partner trackers in Gong. And you pick up a good pulse of your reps and their comfortability and how well enabled they are with partners and which ones you really have to focus your enablement time on too. And it helps you identify when new reps come into the funnel, like which ones don't understand that we have these partners they can lean into too, and gets you working with them that much faster. And you stumble upon some fun conversations every so often too.
Yeah.
You find some interesting things going on, but I think all in all, a great practice to have in the day, in some capacity.
I'm curious if you've dug into if you've had enough at bats with partners either across the AE vector or the CSM vector, where you've looked at productivity per rep. So when I was leading sales at PandaDoc, I mean, the name of the game in going from living in an apartment in San Francisco to actually building a global sales org was PPR, right? Like how do we continue to raise the performance, per rep? And any stories that we could share about account executives that were just way more productive and copying what they did seemed to land at 10 times the effective rate, right? Of whatever, management training came up with, right? Like, so me or, some outside trainer. So if we could say, hey, here's how, rep X over the last 3 months or 6 months has done A, B, or C with their sales funnel, right? And it's because of partners. Have you looked into anything like productivity per rep in terms of like getting manager buy-in, VP buy-in, or rep buy-in in terms of partner engagement, or are the deals kind of too spread across to really get a good understanding on productivity on a per rep basis?
I think we don't look at anything official. I think we do know to a T like which reps of ours are the ones who are the most effective to work with when it comes to partners. And I think those are the ones we probably spend the most time with, but we have not pulled. I mean, we do have a dashboard showing like every rep and how many of the deals they close were actually like partner info, like PIL deals. And like what's nice about them is like my PAMs like to work with them the most. And so like at the end of the day, it's important that like it's kind of a two-way street there internally. But like the holy grail, like what you really want to get to, and like we do have a couple reps at that point, is where XAE has done so many deals with AE at SalesLoft that like they're just passing leads back and forth, and then we just become someone to basically help facilitate that and like let everybody know like, hey, like AE at SalesLoft sent this AE a deal because he knew that Sendoso was a good fit to have them go and joint sell together. So like those ones we can just be shepherds to help make like just facilitate. Like that's the piece that I want to get to. We do have some reps there. I don't think you get all reps at that point, but that's like the holy grail of the being a salesperson and being able to like have that sort of relationship with different teams.
I think this was shared in our kickoff this year by one of our top partners. Fortune 500 company came in and spoke at our company all hands and said the best sellers of 2021 and beyond are the ones who are best at leveraging their ecosystem.
Yep.
And he just said that so matter of fact, just like, look, Adobe in in our transition to really being an ecosystem company, you think of Adobe as ubiquitous, right? I mean, Adobe's bigger than Salesforce. And it kind of like blows our mind to think about it that way. Like they're significantly larger. Like Salesforce is growing, but then Adobe's continued to grow at a very similar clip. And most of their effort has been focused on building from top level alliances to Microsoft, which is the only software company in the world bigger than them, down to their smaller ecosystem partners. If you think about everything happening there, it's been around sharing rep stories, right? Of how having partners involved or what partner was involved and telling those customer stories of what happened in this account that otherwise would not have happened had we not involved these service partners or these technology partners. And I think surfacing that productivity per rep is something that we haven't done a good job of talking about, because I think we all, like from the very beginning of like partner world, you'll hear from the OGs like Bobby Napoltonia. Like Bobby created the Salesforce App Exchange and their enterprise channel. Bigger deals, right? Higher win rate, faster time to close. And that all makes sense, but what does it do for me? Right? Like, okay, I kind of get what you're saying, but it's like, hey, no, the 3 reps that are doing this, here's their earnings, right? Here's their commission. Here's how much above quota that they are. I think that spells wonders for the organization. I think what I would love to get your perspective on, given some of the stats that you've seen, you've obviously been an evangelist for this at Sendoso, is how that was received from other, managers, executives, kind of like counterparts or colleagues within the organization. That you feel like you being in your position were more able to influence, and maybe what your advice might be to someone that is kind of pushing up, right? So they're in that, head of, director, VP, and they're trying to get that C-suite buy-in. So you might have saw it from the other perspective. What would be your advice to the person that's trying to escalate or elevate that profile around all these great metrics that you've been talking about?
Yeah, I think the way that most companies look at partnerships, whether you're big or small, like this is an old school thought process, is purely lead generation. It's like, hey, like I'm going to get as many referral agreements as possible with as many partners as possible. And like, I'm not going to say that we didn't start there, because that's how we were all trained in partnerships. Like, let's just get as many things signed. Like if someone signs something, they bring us one, great. And so basically you have a team of usually like 3 people against a team of like 900 SDRs who are doing the exact same thing. And you're like, yeah, this makes total sense. Like this is like everything partner brings us top of funnel is fine, but it's not as, like the SDRs are bringing us more. So how can you increase that? So, and then you look at comp plans for a lot of like partner managers. It's like, hey, how many deals were partner qualified leads that you brought in that were closed by the sales team? So basically like those deals you're bringing in from partners are closed by somebody else. So you don't have a lot of control of your destiny there. It's like, yeah, like, hey, like here's a deal, like partner brought it in and like AE like totally bogged, you didn't do well on the demo at all. So like they didn't buy us. So like there's all of those things which make it really difficult. So the first thing we looked at was like, how can we change commission plans to not only incentivize pipe? Because I think it's important to have like, hey, like ask for referrals, like that's never going away. But I think the more important piece of partnerships is the partner influence side. So how many deals are you bringing in and then helping with the AE facilitate an actual close, and then helping the CSM find upsells like within that account that was brought to you by a partner, helping your partners like to figure out professional services and like getting kickbacks on that. So like partners need to spend a lot more time internal than they do just trying to source actual pipeline. And the way that we proved that was by showing, hey, we're able to close deals faster when we're involved, and deals that are brought to us by partners have better rates of sticking with us for longer periods of time. So I think that you need to look kind of internal, look downstream, and then pull reports from Salesforce as to like, hey, out of the last couple of years, like the deals that were sourced by partners, like have they stuck around longer? Have they spent more? Like what do those look like? Is like the first place that we started. And then once you have all that data, to go back to your CRO, to go back to whoever you report to, marketing, and say, hey, I think pipe is important, and we'll keep doing that. But secondly, I think if we look internal, we can produce even more revenue ourselves is a really important piece. And then like there's other pieces there too, like there's the channel, that sort of stuff, which is a different conversation. But that's kind of fun to see if you can start producing your own revenue at some point. But that's where I would start.
Braydan, I had no idea how good this conversation was just going to be. I thought we were just doing this because, we've known each other for what? I don't know, going on, we're going to date ourselves. 8 plus years.
9?
Back at, we were in HR tech, and you just articulated something I think that was incredible. Most, I think, partner leaders have this really difficult time articulating the difference between, because I think I've just succinctly been able to articulate this to my organization. So maybe I'll try to summarize.
Yeah.
There's 2 different funnels once you sign a partner. There is partner pipeline, and then there is partner activation. So partner pipeline to me is understanding their account map, talking about specific accounts, doing an account review with the, like our field counterpart, partner account manager, and partner to go, okay, here's how we're going to approach this account. And then you're engaged in some sales activity, whether it's demo or your later stage. But the partner activation funnel is very ambiguous if you're a partner account manager. I mean, there's like literally 100 things that you could do, but they're not directly related to sourcing pipeline, right? It's all about building trust and I think really like buy-in, mind share of like why this technology or this other complementary company I want to bring into my net new deals or into my install base. So they need to understand like the monetary opportunity. They need to understand, I think, the context to feel confident to approach the account. And if you're looking at these 50 things that you could do to activate partners, there's really only one that stands out, which is get in accounts, right? Like get in there, see the technology working, like participate in that. And no partner is going to just source you that first deal and just be like, I'm so bought into the deck that you pitched me on, partner account manager. I'm going to bring you my best customer and source an opportunity for your account executive. That doesn't happen. I mean,
yes. No,
that's what happens with you.
No, that's not the way that like something like no one's gonna be like, hey, like this is I built spent a long time building this great relationship with this account. Here you go use my name and go sell this account under my name. I mean, like maybe like that happens every once in a while, but like what's better is like the model of like working with them to do that is going to be the like straight up referrals is not the future of partnerships. It's more joint selling. It's more growing with an account. It's more like trust takes time with not just accounts with partners as well.
I feel like especially as the just the customer journey has gone completely digital, and like the start of the customer journey has become so blurred between was it a partner referral, was it a visit to the website, was it a webinar that sourced them, was it an event that happened. Like in reality, it's the cacophony of all these touch points. So why are we focused on this one particular one where they went from not being known to known and we have their email addresses as like this crucial step, and just focus on making that journey as fast as possible?
Yeah, I think like the joke I always make internally is like there's not a lot of people that are clicking through the Nap Exchange and Salesforce or whatever have you that are stumbling upon a system. They're like, oh, hot damn, I was looking for a like at this platform. Yes, yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and request time to go ahead and take a demo of whatever it is. Like it's not how people buy. Basically, like especially as like the
they're asking the people that they know and trust.
Yeah, right. Or like they're finding a kick-ass webinar that like maybe they're listening to like on the like with their gym, or maybe there's like case studies like maybe someone's skimming it on LinkedIn and they're being like, cool. Or like maybe their friends are joining a company where they're like, like what is that? Like what do they do? And like then they would inbound, which is a whole other problem with partnerships. Like the whole world of attribution with partnerships is a
Yeah.
shit show, which is one that like I think is interesting that Gong has helped, but I'm sure we all
That's
miss
why
things.
we're on Gong for an hour every day,
Yeah,
picking through for referrals there. Yeah.
right.
I think we need to productize your partner influence pitch though. Basically, Brayden is my point, and that's where I'm going to do a shameless Cloud Software Association plug, a mid roll. I throw them in wherever. So if you're not there, come join along. Slack group got about 4,000 people there, and that I think should be a master class. So they do these things called master classes where they do a deep dive on a very particular topic. I think building the partner influence business case, for a board, for a C-suite, for management, for VPs. I mean, I feel like that's something that probably needs to be delivered at minimum in a QBR type setting. Like, some executive saying, hey, we're going to get partners involved in our deals and our accounts. Yes, they didn't bring you there, but here's why, right? And explaining to them, for every time we do this, the likelihood that they bring us into the next account and they speak more favorably of us, that they actually engage us, here's what happens, right? And in those situations, we still win more. We do this. Getting everyone bought into that, influence motion, I think is critical under the lens of partner activation. At the end of the day, you did partner influence for a year, 2 years, and you never sourced anything. Hard to report that to the street, hard to report that to the board. But I think we all know, I mean, I've seen it. We had, what can I share? We had Matt Query from ROI DNA on the podcast, right, Justin? Mm-hmm. And a fantastic podcast about trust, but we built so much trust with Matt and ROI DNA that I believe that whenever we recorded that, I think we were in like 10 accounts together. I believe we're in 16 accounts now. And these are enterprise accounts. He's bringing us into every single net new deal. Not like one in a blue, every single deal that is sold by this, partner. If they have drift, they're going to service it with some of their special sauce. If they don't have drift, they're bringing us in. Why? Because they were active inside of accounts prior to ever selling or sourcing. Now they source all the time. So, but that original account executive, imagine they had a poor experience, that first one. That AE was really standoffish, didn't want them involved, was a jerk. You don't have that 16 deal partner sitting next to you, right? So you have to get in front of that. You have to build that business case, and I think stream it throughout your organization. And most organizations don't do that. I mean, I feel like I'm guilty of that right now. I want to go back to the beginning because I think this is related. You said that, you realize these things is whenever you changed your title. So you brought up some metrics, some bets that you were making at Sendoso. When was this communicated? Was this like a slow drip over time with like social proof, or was there a, specific event, like maybe a title change, a sales kickoff, a QBR, where you presented this to the organization as like a strategic imperative, a core company objective? And the reason why I ask is Bobby Knapp from Salesforce said that everything changed the day that Benioff put in the company kickoff one of 3 bullet points for the year, which was partner love, right? He said everything changed because I had Benioff's executive creed that like, no, partner experience matters. Was there that moment, or was it more of a slow burn for you?
No, there was. So like I have kind of the cool job internally here where I get to jump around to teams that need help. And so this is like I did like sales, and then I jumped over to enablement and kind of rebuilt how we do all our enablement. And then and then when we were doing enablement, we noticed quickly that a lot of the CX team and AE team, they knew our partners, but they didn't know how everything functioned and worked together. And so it was one of those things where I was like, this is kind of the light bulb went off as to like, okay, how many partners do we have? We have a lot of agencies. We have a lot of integrations. Are we working with them to help educate us so we can talk about them more effectively? And I bet they don't know a whole lot about us either. And so like that was like kind of that moment where like we need to revamp partnerships altogether. And I will go in and basically run that team, revamp the team where we'll focus on agencies and we'll focus on integrations. And then we'll not only educate our staff internally as to what all these guys actually do, but externally we'll work with these partners to actually go to market together and actually sell our products jointly. And because I knew the sales side and the enablement side, it made a lot of sense to kind of go that direction. The piece that we're still working on is like marketing support is massive in partnerships. And I don't know if everyone really understands that, like how much work you actually do with the marketing team. But like that has been one where when I made the switch, it was, hey, we're putting partnerships on their own island. They're going to be like run by Braydan, and they're going to work hand in hand with marketing and with sales to make this work. And the other light bulb moment was we saw that our sales team, this was a new muscle they needed to develop. Like how to co-sell was one that you're not typically taught when you're being taught to be an AE. Like you're typically, hey, push your product. You're not typically like one of your first questions you ask when you hop on a demo, right? Is like, great, what softwares do you use? And someone's like, I use Salesforce and I use this thing and this thing. And like basically the only reason you're asking is so you can write it down into Salesforce. And like you never friggin' ask about it.
Yeah.
Like why not ask like how you have those systems hooked up together? And so we needed to make our sales team more consultative. And like that was a piece that was kind of like a moment too for why we jumped or why I jumped.
I feel like in SaaS, it's pretty common for, everyone's doing some sort of event, campaigns, webinars, something where they're trying to produce some, I think, higher level content other than just the, product marketing page, right? Like people are trying to educate people in their space more and more. I would go so far as to say it's fairly ubiquitous, meaning if you're trying to educate an audience, you're more likely to bring in counterparts, other experts from maybe tangential spaces. So technology partners, in some cases, solution partners. I feel like from the beginning, I've never had any pushback around doing partner marketing when it came to those types of things, right? Like, an event, right? So a virtual event or something like that.
Yep.
But when it comes to like actually maximizing the effort and developing, some sort of, I hate to say attribution model because we'll go down too far of a rabbit hole, but marketing planning around partnerships. How have you partnered with marketing as an organization to do partner marketing? How has that formed? Because I feel like most marketing orgs are like, yeah, that's great. Bring in these 6 partners. We'll do this event. We'll all share leads. Awesome. Thank you so much. And then there's zero like association in the marketing model that like technology partners brought stuff to the table. I feel like a lot of companies are kind of there because it's more organic. How do you like build that partnership where marketing starts to think, okay, here's how we report on partner, impact, or here's how we leverage partner impact?
Yeah, I think it takes time with marketing. Like one of the big things with them is you're absolutely right. Is like the question they always ask you is, hey, all right, who are your tier 1 partners? And you're like, well, it sort of changes dependent on the month because like these guys used to be tier 1, but now they just got acquired by Vista, or like, hey, these guys used to be fantastic, but like now they haven't gotten back to me in 2 weeks and they built a new integration with a competitor or whatever have you. So like that's it changes. So like when you go to marketing and you're like, hey, I'd like to do an event and I want to do it with this partner and we need to make it happen sooner rather than later because right now we're both crushing the market together and we're both going to go target EMEA together. So I think it's really good with marketing to kind of like open up like the phrase like open the kimono is always a horrible one, but like show like what your game plan is and like show what your strategy is as to like why you want to go down the road with that partner and why it's important, and then to introduce them, like to stick with marketing the whole time, like throwing it over the fence, being like, hey, I'd like to do a webinar. Here's the partner I want to do it with. Make it happen. Like, no, but you need to stick with it the entire time and kind of show like what are the goals you're trying to get out of it and why is this important and like how does this help the sales team? How does this help what their MQLs are? What is marketing trying to get to in terms of their number? Like you almost have to sell internally with the marketing team and to kind of help them out a bit, which is really important to get to that level with that team for sure.
One final question, kind of pivoting from the marketing conversation around planning for your fiscal year. So most companies have an operating plan, right? You say, hey, here's the top of funnel to bottom of funnel and what falls out and what grows. Here's what we send to the board. Board goes, great, awesome, go get it. And I feel like the partnerships line item in there, it's not a full partner operating model for most organizations that have not reached, ecosystem maturity. Did you, before you had this title, I'm just curious, so we're in July right now, were you participating in the kind of operating plan for, the fiscal year that we're in? And did you have a partner operating model whenever you did, or not yet, and you're going to for this next year?
I would say not yet and going to for this next year. Like we're working on it. We're not there yet. I think like for us, it was like, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've talked about, like the looking at partners is more of like a PIL model, more like not PQL, like private generation, like all that's pretty new for us. Like this is definitely a hypothesis as to how we see it working. And to like, it's worked really well these past 2 quarters I've been in the role. And the goal is it continues to. So like I would say like now I have a seat at the table to look at like, hey, H2, what are we doing in terms of a partner landscape? How are the partnership teams going to influence like the product actual roadmap, which is massive? And so like being involved in those conversations is really important. So we're getting to that point. We're not there yet, but hopefully in another 6 months, more companies will be pushing this as well.
And that's how I close Braydan on coming back on the podcast again to tell me how he, implemented the partner operating model at Sendoso. Right. Boom. We're going to have you back on, Braydan. This was an absolute blast. And thank you for sharing so much insight around this. I have a feeling that in the future, we're going to have more chief partnerships officers on. And hopefully Sendoso has a fantastic outcome. And you're a trendsetter.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
All right. Well, last final shout out. Cloud Connect, Cloud Software Association, or SaaS Connect, sorry. SaaS Connect with the Cloud Software Association in-person event. We're back. So go check it out. I believe early bird tickets are all sold out, but I don't know, we'll have 600-700 partner people there is my guess. And it's going to be a blast. And we'll do something special with PartnerUp there. So we will see you there. Justin, what are they supposed to do with the socials?
5 stars, all platforms. Drop the follow.
All platforms. Oh, one thing too, I did want to give some shout outs. We should start doing this. We get so much amazing love from people on LinkedIn just saying thank you. So
you thinking of Carly right now?
Give a shout out to Carly. So for shooting us a nice note saying that she shared it with a bunch of people, and it's been really helpful for her taking on her first formal leadership position in partnerships. So nice. Thank you, Carly, for the shout out. And if you really like it, tag Braydan on LinkedIn and share the post. So
please,
that's the other way to raise the profession. So share these things on LinkedIn. That's going to be my new CTA. Share them on LinkedIn.
Passive aggressively send it to your superior or your C-suite.
No, this one's going to make it in front of some C-suite people. I guarantee you that because of Braydan. So, all right, we'll see y'all next time. Peace out.